I thought Goosebumps nostalgia had reached its peak last year when prices for Goosebumps items on eBay were sky high. But now when I go on eBay to look at Goosebumps collectibles and I see that the prices are even higher than ever, now I know Goosebumps fever has really struck. So I figured, since it's been a couple of years since I did my last Goosebumps collection video, it's time to do it again. In this video, I'll be talking about all of the original 62 Goosebumps books. I have first edition, first prints of most of the original Goosebumps books now. So I'll get to show you all of the little bonus features that came along with those first printings. You'll get to see what the books looked like upon their original release, which I think is really interesting. And then in future videos, I'll be showing Goosebumps Series 2000, Slappy World, Give Yourself Goosebumps, Goosebumps Horrorland, some of my collectibles, which I have many new collectibles now. So enough rambling, let's get into the original 62 Goosebumps books.
Fox Kids Library brings the most popular books to life in the most thrilling, spine-tingling series ever. Goosebumps, coming this fall to Fox Kids.
Starting off, we have not a first printing. I do have a first printing of this book, and I'll show it in just a second. This is actually a reprint of Welcome to Dead House by R.L. Stine, and it is signed by Mr. Stine himself. This was given to me as a gift. So it's very cool to have the first Goosebumps book signed by R.L. Stine, but this is not a first edition. This is a much later reprint that came out recently. This is the first edition, first printing of Welcome to Dead House. A big thing I want to do with this video is kind of show you guys how to discern a first edition, a first printing, and hopefully if your hobby is collecting first printings of Goosebumps books, you won't be swindled on eBay. I should also say a first edition and a first printing are technically not the same. Any books from the original run are considered first editions. However, they aren't always first printings, which is also very important. The first printing means this is the first batch of books that was printed to go out to bookstores and book fairs. You'll find that the first printing has all of the original ads. If there were any typos in the first printing, those are all going to be intact, because those are usually fixed in later printings of books. What you find with a first printing is that this is exactly as it was the day it was released back in 1992. This is the book you would have pulled off the shelf on the release day before Goosebumps was the phenomenon that it is today. So I'm going to show you right now how to tell if this is a first printing. I mean, for one, it's not going to have a number on the spine. The first 6 Goosebumps books did not have any numbers on the spines. That was added starting with book 7, Night of the Living Dummy. And how you really tell if it is a first printing is that it's going to have a number line here on the copyright page, and it's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If it's got a 1 in the number line, that means it is a first print of this edition. Now you may see further down on the page, it says first scholastic printing, July 1992. A lot of people will assume that, oh, that means I have a first printing, a first scholastic printing. Or eBay sellers will say, oh, this is a true first printing because it says this. False. This is simply telling you that this is when the first printing came out. It came out in July 1992. Does that make any sense to you guys? I can always do a video explaining this a little bit further. I just want to make sure that you guys don't get ripped off on eBay if you're trying to collect first editions, first printings like I do. Moving on, we also have a first print of Stay Out of the Basement. This is a true first edition, first printing, no number on the spine, and it does list number 1 on the copyright page. Stay Out of the Basement is a great book. Just like Welcome to Dead House is actually a lot darker and scarier than a lot of the later Goosebumps books. This one is also pretty dark, and if you really read into it, this has a lot of elements of, the parents in this book being kind of in a midlife crisis. We have the father figure who is very distant. He's acting very strange. He's working all the time. He doesn't spend any time with his kids or his wife. His wife is going off to spend the weekend with her sister, I believe. So reading it now, I'm like, oh, the mom clearly needs a break from her husband and she needs to get away for a while. And here she is leaving her children with her husband, who is clearly not doing okay. There are some deeper themes there that are very subtle that I feel like are there. Some people will say, no, you're reading into it. I think they're there. It's just subtle. Next, we have a first edition, first print of Monster Blood, the third book in the Goosebumps series. Again, it is a true first print. This edition, unfortunately, is pretty rough. Like, it's very, very worn. The pages are brown and dirty and brittle. There's like bookworm bites. There's some water damage. So I'm going to replace this eventually, but I'm just really glad to have a first print. Now, I have read this book. In fact, I've read the majority of the Goosebumps books. There's only a couple that I haven't really read. This one I read many years ago as a kid, and I didn't care for it as much. It's a fine book. I just don't think, compared to the other Goosebumps books, that it really holds up quite as well. Note that I'm trying to make an effort to say Goosebumps book, and that this isn't a Goosebump book, like a singular goosebump. I noticed that in my old videos, is that I keep wanting to say this Goosebump book. It's Goosebumps book. There's an S. It's not a singular goosebump. I don't have a first print of Say Cheese and Die just yet, but this is an early printing. This is a 5th print, and it is lacking the number on the spine. This book is also a whole lot of fun. You know, you've got this Polaroid camera that predicts the future and all of its ghastly outcomes. Or is it predicting the future? Or maybe it's changing the future and making it into something dark. I'd really like to reread this one because it's been a long time. In fact, I'd love to go back from the very beginning and reread all of the Goosebumps books. Some of these I've read multiple times, even as an adult, but some of them I've not read since I was a kid. So it might be fun to maybe do a little vlog going back and revisiting all these books and reacting to them now as an adult. Next up, we've got The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, which is book number 5. This is also a true first print. As somebody who loves Egyptology and mummies and pyramids, this book rocked my world when I was a kid. And the fact that the kids in this book are actually in serious danger, like there's somebody in this book who wants to kill these kids. It's a lot darker than those later books. Like this one, for instance. Let's Get Invisible, the 6th book in the series, which is basically an allegory for addiction in a children's book. Except these kids aren't addicted to drugs or alcohol, they are addicted to becoming invisible. There's a mirror in their basement that turns them invisible, and they slowly start to get addicted to the feeling, and it starts to change them. A very good book and very intense. So this is a true first edition, first print, and pretty good condition. Now, this one is underrated as hell, and nobody's ever heard of it before. This is Night of the Living Dummy, book number 7. Nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about Slappy the Dummy. I'm kidding. Take a joke, kid. Slappy is, you know, the icon of Goosebumps now. I personally preferred when Curly the skeleton, this guy right here, was the icon of Goosebumps because he's cool, and I always wish that he had had his own Goosebumps book. But here is a true first edition, first printing of Night of the Living Dummy. You do have the number on the spine. This was the first book to have the number printed on the spine. Oh, I have a couple of interesting books here. Speaking of Night of the Living Dummy, here is the Gareth Stevens hardcover edition. This is the large print library edition. The first 10 books in this series were printed in these editions in 1997. So I have Night of the Living Dummy without any of the library markings. I also have Say Cheese and Die in this edition and Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. Those are the only ones I have right now, but they're really cool and very nice and sturdy. And I think when I reread these books, these are the editions I'm going to read because they're just, you know, heavy duty. And now we're going to take a little breather and go to a commercial break.
If you are looking for real thrills, call into Angus and Robertson Book World. Right now, we've got Goosebumps books reduced from $6.95 to $5.55. And that's not all. Only Angus and Robertson Book World gives you a Goosebumps bookmark when you buy a Goosebumps book. This bookmark proves you are a member of Angus and Robertson Book World's exclusive Goosebumps Club, and it means you'll enjoy great Goosebumps offers in the future. It's enough to give you goose pimples. Get your Goosebumps books for $5.55 at Angus and Robertson Book World and join the club now.
Welcome back. Moving on to one of my very favorite Goosebumps books is The Girl Who Cried Monster, which has a great cover. I love the purple and the contrast here. It just works really well. Now this one's a little confusing to me because it does have the full number line. It is a first edition. However, I've seen editions of this book floating around that have a little logo here on the cover that says free bookmark inside, and it comes with a free bookmark. This edition does not have that little logo, and there is no bookmark inside. So I don't know if maybe this was a Scholastic Book Club edition, and if the other one was released in stores as the trade edition, or maybe it's vice versa, and this is the true first print. But either way, I would love to get an edition with that bookmark inside. But again, the prices for these books are sky high on eBay right now, so the chances of getting one, I'm gonna have to wait.
I hate it! I hate it!
Another Goosebumps library edition. This is one for The Girl Who Cried Monster, and this is one that I showed in my last Goosebumps collection video because it's a little bit of an oddity. It actually is missing a section of the book and reprints another section. And I had somebody comment once saying, oh, that's just because, you know, at the end of the Goosebumps books, they would include a preview of the future Goosebumps book, and that's all it is. I know they did that, but that's not it. I have to explain it further because I have to show you how weird this is. So this book goes up to page 90, and then here's page 27. So you have page 27 through 58, and then it goes to page 123. So you've got the ending of the book, and then it goes to the preview for the next book. So this is seriously just a misprint. And part of me was really disappointed to see that when I got this book home, but then I realized it's kind of a weird thing. It's kind of cool to have. So a library edition with a misprint. Next up, book number 9, Welcome to Camp Nightmare. Unfortunately, this is one of the very few Goosebumps books I have that isn't a first print. This is actually an 18th printing, but it is in really nice condition, and it's cool to just, you know, have it as a placeholder until I can find that first print. But again, very expensive.
Don't raise prices. I wouldn't want to be accused of unfair business practices in my own town. And I can't be responsible for what happens to greedy little pigs.
Book number 10, The Ghost Next Door, another much darker Goosebumps book that has actually a very sad ending, and it always makes me cry every time I read it. This is a true first print in wonderful condition. My favorite Goosebumps book, The Haunted Mask, book number 11, another true first edition, first print in beautiful condition, and it also includes the cardboard mask still intact. I am so happy to have this daggone book. Book number 12, Be Careful What You Wish For. Now at this point in the series, starting with book 11, we started having extra fun little things included in pretty much all of the Goosebumps books. Not all of them, but mostly all of them. And this is an example of that. This says special Goosebumps tattoo inside. It took me forever to find a copy of this for a good price, and I finally did. Piano Lessons Can Be Murder. This one is a true first edition, first print. Great shape. One of the best covers in the series. I love this cover, and the book itself is so much fun. Moving on to book number 14, The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. This is not a first print. I really want one because the first print came with a calendar inside, a little fold-up calendar, and you can find it on eBay. It's not necessarily rare. There are a lot of copies that pop up all the time, like every other day there's a new one going up for sale, but it's always expensive. It's always like $40, $50, $60. You Can't Scare Me, book number 15, which didn't come with anything special, but it is a true first edition, first print. A really good cover. The book itself is fine. I do feel this one's a little bit boring and not much really happens until the very end of the book. It's not scary. It's true. You Can't Scare Me. One Day at Horrorland, another true first edition, first print. So shiny and pretty. And look at that cover art. Oh, so vibrant. I always wanted to go to Horrorland as a kid. I didn't care if it was dangerous. I didn't care if there were monsters who wanted to kill me. I did think the idea of like pinching the monsters and making them deflate was kind of dumb. Even as a kid, I was like, that's stupid. But still, I do enjoy this book. Why I'm Afraid of Bees. Another one that's kind of funny, honestly. I mean, even the cover makes me laugh. But I do know people who have read this book and said that it actually really scared them because they're afraid of bees. This is a first print, and there's nothing really exciting about it except that it does have that logo there on the cover that says, "What gives you goosebumps? See inside for details." And then there's this form in the back of the book that you could fill out to win prizes. So that's another example of some of the neat little things that you only see in the original first prints of these books. The next book also has that same "What gives you goosebumps" little splat on the cover. This is Monster Blood 2. This is the appearance of Cuddles the hamster, and I talked about this in my last Goosebumps collection video that I actually ended up naming my cat after Cuddles the hamster. Rest in peace, Cuddles. He was my best friend. I had him from the time I was 3 years old until I was 18. But anyway, not to be a bummer, this is the wonderful cover for Monster Blood 2. It doesn't matter how scary he tries to be, he's just so cute. They kept the "What gives you goosebumps" thing going. This is number 19, Deep Trouble. I always loved this cover, but I was very disappointed by the fact that it's actually about a mermaid. That's kind of the premise of this book. I still think it's good. I think it's a really good book, and I loved it as a kid, and I loved it when I reread it as an adult. And if I recall, there is an appearance of a shark, but it's, you know, it's not the premise of the book. Number 20, The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, one of my favorite books, one of my favorite covers. And this is a first print. It says "Free bookmark" inside. And here is the bookmark, still intact. And with that, we're gonna go to a commercial break.
Every night the ghost of the poor boy roamed the halls looking for his missing head. Even now you hear his footsteps.
Let your imagination run wild at Target, where you'll find the latest Goosebumps books and videos, plus a huge assortment of candy.
I knew that wasn't a real monster.
Hey creeps, welcome back. I don't have a first print of Ghost Beach. This is one of my favorite books, which is why I have a t-shirt. I just think that's some of the best cover art because I love graveyards so much, and I like the idea of like this graveyard beside the beach, and then you've got this Reaper ghostly figure emerging. It's just so cool. Go Eat Worms, which I don't even know if I've read this one, or maybe I have and I just forgot about it. I love the cover. I think the cover is very cool, but the book itself, if I did read it, I didn't remember anything about it other than I know there's a giant worm at the end because I've seen the TV episode, but I really don't think I've read the book. Next is number 23, Return of the Mummy, which was the introduction of the Goosebumps fan club. This was the first time it was ever marketed, was in this book. Of course, the Goosebumps fan club was a really big deal when I was a kid. I wanted to be a part of it so bad, but it was expensive and my parents said no. And then eventually I got them to cave and they ordered it for me, but it was too late. The Goosebumps fan club was no more, and all they did was send me like a photograph of R.L. Stine and a letter saying, "We're sorry, we don't do that anymore." And I was so sad. I was very close to being part of the Goosebumps fan club, but it just did not pan out. I finally got a first print of Phantom of the Auditorium, which is another beautiful copy. Attack of the Mutant. As a kid, I went through a phase where I was really into comic books. Like I wanted to collect comic books. And I read this and was like, oh my God, this is me. I was really, really into this book for a time. And now, reading it as an adult, I think it's kind of cheesy and silly, which I know is the intent because a lot of those comic books were really silly and cheesy. But in terms of it fitting into the Goosebumps canon, I feel it's just a little bit off. But it does have a pretty stellar cover, and I like just this pink and green building in the background. It's kind of weird. Oh, I forgot to show these. We have Why I'm Afraid of Bees, which is the second edition reprint, and Ghost Beach, another reprint. These are first prints of the second editions. I don't think I'm ever really going to collect these editions. I'm perfectly fine just having the originals. My Hairiest Adventure. This one gets a whole lot of hate. I mean, it's a silly book. It is about puberty basically, and it doesn't have the most interesting cover, but it does make me laugh, and I think the story itself is a riot. I finally was able to replace my old copy. If you saw my previous video, you'll see that my old copy was in terrible condition. This one is a pristine first printing, so much better. I've had so much luck these past couple of years just replacing all of the old books in my series and trying to get nice first prints. There was an eBay store recently that posted a ton of them, and they all had like the stickers and the bookmarks and stuff included. for a couple of dollars a piece, and I snatched a whole bunch of them up, and I was so grateful. So I got to get most of these all in one swoop for very cheap. And then there was a Half Price Books near me that had a whole bunch of nice first prints that I was able to get. My collection's a lot better than it was in my last video. Next up is A Night in Terror Tower, which is book 27, another one of my favorite books. This one is just so intense. The TV episode is also very weird and existential and creepy. Just that feeling of not knowing who you are or where you are, and not having your parents anywhere around, and you're just alone, and you don't know what's happening around you, and you're being chased and pursued relentlessly. The person that's after them, this executioner, wants to kill them, like wants to execute them. It's dark stuff. Next, Cuckoo Clock of Doom, which is lighter and not quite as intense, but you also have this sensation while reading the book of, this kid turns the head on the bird and the cuckoo clock because his dad collects antiques. He wants to get his sister in trouble and blame the head being turned on his sister. Well, it turns out when he turns the head on the cuckoo clock, he turns back time, and every day he wakes up, he's a little bit younger until he's just a baby, and soon he's going to be no more. Like, he will not exist anymore, and that's it. Again, it's kind of dark, but also kind of silly at the same time. This is a beautiful first print. In my last video, I had a copy that had scribbles, like pen scribbles, all over the cover, thanks to my sister who was a baby at the time. So, Taylor, I forgive you. But I was able to finally get a replacement, so this one looks very nice. All right, I've been talking for a long time. I need to go get some water. Here's a commercial break.
Can you identify who it was that frightened you, ma'am?
I'll try.
This Halloween, terrifying creatures are on the loose at Taco Bell.
It's them!
Wanted Goosebumps at Taco Bell. Slappy's Candy Keeper, Cuddles the Horrible Hamster, Rappin' Mummy, and Skullmobile. Get them now. Goosebumps collectibles only at Taco Bell.
And we're back with book number 29 in the series, Monster Blood 3. And of course, we are keeping with the tradition of having Converse sneakers on all of the covers because Tim Jacobus, the artist, loved Converse sneakers. In this one, I believe Evan is back and he eats the monster blood and becomes big. I actually have not read this one, so this one's kind of a blind spot for me. It came from beneath the sink, which is about a mutant sponge. It's actually not a sponge, it's called a gruel. Anyway, it's supposed to look like a sponge and it's under the sink, so they think it's a sponge. It's such a silly book, but goodness gracious me, look at that beautiful cover. We also have the return of Slappy. Took kind of a long time. This is book 31 in the series, so that's quite a lot of books to go without any Slappy. This one, to me, is better than the first Night of the Living Dummy book. I really like this one. I also have this weird, thin edition of Night of the Living Dummy 2, which I talked about in my last collector's video. Somebody in the comments said that they think this is actually a bootleg. Like, maybe somebody printed this and sold it for real cheap. So, might be a bootleg. That's a no-no. Don't do that. Cameron from the future here, and sorry for the bad lighting and the messy hair. I've been editing all day and pulling my hair out. I actually have a little bit more news about this mystery book, this supposed bootleg. It's not a bootleg, it is a book club edition. I was recently given this as a gift, which is a Scholastic Book Club pack. This would have been something you got either from the Scholastic Book Fairs or the book orders. It's just a mix of posters and activity books, and it also came with a copy of Say Cheese and Die Again, and look at this. It's super thin, and it's got no barcode on the back. It looks exactly like that copy of Night of the Living Dummy 2. So there you have it. That copy actually came in a set probably just like this one from the Scholastic Book Orders, and they just made the paper a lot thinner in order to cut costs. So, mystery solved. I also have 2 editions of the next book in the series, which is 32, The Barking Ghost. I have a true first edition first print that does still have the free terrifying tattoo included, which is right here. And then I have this really nice book club edition, which, as you can see, it doesn't have a barcode. And inside, there is no tattoo, but there is this very neat fold out. It says, get Goosebumps all summer long. And it basically shows you all of the different Goosebumps books that were going to come out during that summer in 1994 or 95, whenever this book came out. This advertisement is only available in this book club edition of The Barking Ghost. The Horror at Camp Jelly Jam. This one was another that I got from that eBay store, and they sold it to me for like $2, and I couldn't believe it because this still has the decal inside. I'm gonna unfold it for you really quick. I believe this decal was to promote Tales to Give You Goosebumps, because that's the cover. Again, you don't need to spend a ton of money on eBay to get these books. Just be patient and keep an eye out. Set alerts on eBay, go to Half Price Books, anything that you can to try to find these books. Just keep an eye out and don't jump at the first one you see on eBay and spend a bunch of money. It's not necessary. Here we have Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes, and this is another one I got from that eBay store. It has the glow-in-the-dark sticker inside, which features Ghost Beach, and this is actually for like a light switch. You know, it's a light switch cover. I've read this a couple of times. I've also listened to the audiobook, you know, the cassette tape. I actually just recently listened to that while on a drive. It's very goofy and cartoony and more of a comedic Goosebumps book. It's pretty funny. A Shocker on Shock Street, which is about a horror movie theme park. So a little bit like Horrorland, but not quite. This is more like based around horror movies. Reading it as a kid, I also wanted to go to this theme park. 36, the sequel to the Haunted Mask 2, which I think is a pretty solid sequel. It's not quite as good as the first book by any means, but I do like that we have all of the characters come back. You know, it's following a different character, Steve, who was one of the bullies from the first book, but you also have Carly Beth and Sabrina. You get to see how far along Carly Beth has come as a character. She's not the fearful character she once was. She's pretty tough now. I think it was a really good way to kind of bring back the characters and the story. The Headless Ghost, which is another one of my favorite covers. I love the blues here and the purples, and again the border that they chose. Is it just me, or do the colors kind of match what's going on here in my library? That's kind of spooky. The Abominable The Abominable Snowman of Pasadena. I always have to do that twice. I've actually not read this one, so there's nothing I can really say about it. But there is a picture of me at my 5th birthday party where it was Goosebumps themed, and I have a copy of this book sitting in front of me. So originally I got this as a gift for my 5th birthday. I've since got a nicer first edition, first print of it, so this one's in really good shape. But I love those pictures of me at my 5th birthday party with all of the Goosebumps stuff. I wish I still had some of that stuff, but sadly I don't. How I Got My Shrunken Head, another one of my favorite covers, the greens. I love those greens. This book is a weird one, but it's very enjoyable, especially if you like jungle adventures. Now we are entering the 40s. We have Night of the Living Dummy 3, which also is a first printing with the cards and bookmark. This one might actually be tied with Night of the Living Dummy 2, now that I think about it, because not only do you have Slappy in this book, but you have multiple dummies, and I like the dusty attic in this book as well, where all of the dummies are kept. It's just very spooky. Bad Hair Day, which also has kind of a goofy cover and a very goofy premise about a magician stuck in the body of a rabbit. Number 42 is Egg Monsters from Mars, which as a kid was always one of my very favorite covers, but then when I grew up and I actually ended up reading the book for the first time, I discovered that the book is not one of my faves. It just has kind of a meandering premise, but I love the cover and I love the creation of the egg monsters from Mars. This book also has the bookmark and cards intact. I remember loving this one as a kid. This is Beast from the East, which has a wonderful cover, and this one is also very different from the other Goosebumps books and doesn't feel like your traditional Goosebumps, but at the same time it's got this very interesting premise. It's more of a fantasy story. And while this also does have your traditional, you know, twist ending, the ending for this, while funny, also feels very, very dark at the same time, because it's clear these kids aren't gonna make it out of the situation after all of their efforts. Say Cheese and Die again, which I do have a first printing of, but sadly there's no bookmark, no cards. However, there are copies on eBay right now that look really good, and they're not too expensive. I see this one go for generally $13, $14, $15, which compared to the others isn't bad. Another camp themed book, we have Ghost Camp, which has a great cover. I also have a puzzle of this one that I used to put together all the time back in the 90s. I just love these camp books because it does remind me of my own experience as a camper in middle school, you know, going to camp for a week, camping out in a cabin with my classmates and telling ghost stories around the fire, all of that good stuff. How to kill a monster. At this point, most of the books came with Goosebumps trading cards and bookmarks. Like, this was at the peak of Goosebumps craze back in the 90s. Pretty fun book. It's another one that has kind of a Southern Gothic vibe to it. Here's one I never read. This is Legend of the Lost Legend. I guess the cover didn't appeal to me quite as much, but looking at it now, I think it looks really cool, and I do want to read this. This was more my speed when I was a kid. Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns. I loved this book. I read it over and over. I just loved Halloween, so a bunch of pumpkin heads, like, yeah, I'm there. This one has the trading cards. There's actually a picture of me as a kid holding a library copy of this book. Vampire Breath, another one of my faves as a kid. It's got those, you know, spooky storms and a really funny twist ending. Now, a little fun fact, this is a first edition, first print. Doesn't come with any cards or bookmarks or stickers or anything. However, at the exact same time that this was published, they also did a Scholastic Book Club edition, which has some shiny holographic stickers inside. I used to own a copy of that one, but as a kid, I had taken the stickers out. So I finally found a nice first printing, but I would really like to track down the Book Club edition that has those holographic stickers. Here is Calling All Creeps, as the bookmarks and the cards. I believe there was also another edition of this as a book club edition that was published with the cards and the bookmark, but it also had holographic stickers. This is one of my favorite covers. I mean, this one does not get enough love. Those creatures are awesome. I love the phone booth. I love the lighting, how the light kind of reflects off of the skin of these monsters. Here's another that doesn't really get enough love in my opinion, but I kind of understand why at the same time, because it has a really kind of dumb ending, but I love it because it makes me laugh. On one hand, I feel like the first part of this book is really creepy and spooky, and it totally makes you feel the Christmassy winter vibes, but at the same time, the ending comes and kind of slaps you in the face with this really silly moment. But anyway, this is Beware the Snowman, and I love it. I try to read this every winter. I don't always succeed, but hopefully this winter I can get a chance to reread this because it's just such a fun time. Here we go. Here's a good example of that Scholastic Book Club thing I was telling you about. So here is How I Learned to Fly, no barcode. So that's your first clue that this is a book club edition. It comes with those the standard bookmarks and trading cards, which the first printing has, but also this includes some holographic stickers. So this is one of those occurrences where the book club edition is actually a little more valuable than the first edition. And we have probably one of the goofiest Goosebumps books of all time, Chicken. So yeah, nice shiny copy of that. A pretty rare book overall. Now we're gonna move to the last few books, which are down here on this shelf. But before I do that, let's go to commercial.
You can take the kids down under the sea with Ariel. And beware, you're in for a scare as the ghouls from Goosebumps rise to life at the new Goosebumps Horrorland Fright Show.
Welcome back. It's time to continue on with the last few books in the series. We have Don't Go to Sleep, which is, I think, one of my least favorite books in the series, even though it is one of my favorite covers. I think it's a really cool cover. But the book itself, it's a big, long, extended dream sequence, basically. It's just kind of weird and goes all over the place. I do want to reread this one day, though, and hopefully I'll feel a little bit different. Bookmark, trading cards, got them. Here's another goofy one. The later books are all pretty goofy, very cartoony, not as dark as the earlier books, but I still enjoy these because, I mean, I was a kid when these were coming out, so these are all very nostalgic to me. And this is one of my favorites. It's about a haunted typewriter, actually, and whatever this kid writes about, it ends up coming true. So he writes about the blob that ate everyone, and it ends up coming true. You know, I'm a writer. I have a couple of books out. You can find them on Amazon, links down below. So as a kid, reading about a kid who also wanted to be a writer, I was all into it. It's a very goofy book, so don't go into this expecting anything too serious, but I do enjoy the writing angle of the book. Going back to camp, we have The Curse of Camp Cold Lake, another favorite cover that is actually genuinely freaky to me. Those eyes seem to follow you wherever you go. I really don't know how Tim Jacobus does it. He's just a master. The book itself is in pretty decent condition, but I am a little bummed because the trading cards are loose. The bookmark isn't, but the trading cards came loose. Back to the goofiness, we have My Best Friend is Invisible, which is probably the goofiest cover of all time. This is a pretty fun book about a kid who, his imaginary friend isn't so imaginary. These later books in the series do become increasingly rarer and hard to find, especially in good condition for some reason, but I was very lucky to find a nice pristine copy, though there's this sticker that I need to get off, and I'm a little worried about it because some of these stickers in the past have been very tricky. If you have any trouble getting stickers off your books, I would recommend using a hairdryer first and letting it sit there for about 20 to 30 seconds, and then slowly peeling it off. If there's any residue left, I would recommend Goo Gone or maybe even just some cooking oil. But be very careful because sometimes the stickers want to peel off the gloss, and that's no fun. Deep Trouble 2. We're returning to Deep Trouble after like 40 books. This one is in pretty nice shape. It does have a little bit of a crease here, but overall, it's a good copy. It does have the trading cards and the bookmark intact. Here's one that I still need a replacement of. I've had this copy since I was a kid. The Haunted School. It's just a very rare book, and it's hard to get for a good price on eBay because of these frickin' resellers.
I hate it! I hate it!
My copy is a first print, but it's not in good shape. Like the spine is taped up. I don't know if you can see. There's my name. Had this for a very long time. Werewolf Skin, which is very hard to find, especially with the werewolf mask intact. So I had a copy of this book as a kid. I got it for Christmas. I ripped the mask out right away. I've regretted it ever since. Well, anyway, for about 25 years, I've been looking for a copy of this book that still has the mask. And I finally found one at Half Price Books. So it's got the mask intact. Unfortunately, someone about ripped the cover off of this book, and there's also a big chunk missing here. So instead of ripping the mask out, they decided to try to rip the cover off, I guess. So I'm still in the market for one of these ones as well, because I'd like to get a pristine copy, but at least the mask is there. I Live in Your Basement. I remember as a kid coming home from school, and my grandma was there. She was babysitting me that day, me and my siblings. And she would often tell me to go pick out a book after school, and she would read it to me. And my grandma did not like horror. She would read me Goosebumps sometimes, but she was not a fan, but I would often still pick them out because I loved Goosebumps. This one is actually really weird and trippy and very gory. So she started reading me this book, and she was like, I can't read this to you. I think after this, she continued to feel like these books were contributing to me being the delinquent that I wasn't. Because I was a very well-behaved kid. I did everything I was told. So oops. I thought I was safe because it's a Goosebumps book, but I guess not. Now it has been over 20 years since I've read that book, probably close to 25 years. So maybe it's not as goopy and gross as I remember it being, but at the time, it felt pretty out there. And last, but definitely not least, one of the rarest Goosebumps books ever, the very last book in the series, number 62, Monster Blood 4. This is my pristine first print. I don't think there was more than one printing of this book to begin with, so that's why it's so rare. It's just because there just aren't as many copies of this book in existence, so you have to try to track it down. I have read this one, even though I've not read Monster Blood 3. It's not the best way to end the Goosebumps series, but I love this cover. I especially love this guy here, who's got his mouth on the faucet of the shower, and he's just filling up with water. I think that's so funny. We also have our bookmark trading cards, including a sneak peek of Goosebumps Series 2000, which is the one that came right after this, and that is the next series we're going to be looking at in this next video of my Goosebumps collection series. So there you have it. Those are all 62 of my original Goosebumps books. My collection still isn't complete. I still have a couple books to replace, a couple that I would like to get better copies of. But in the meantime, I'm very, very happy with how far my collection has come in the past couple of years since I did my last video. Just wait, because we're not done. We have Series 2000 to look at. We have Give Yourself Goosebumps, Horrorland. I'll be back hopefully very soon with those videos. Thank you all for watching. Please don't forget to give me a like, comment down below. Even if you don't have anything to say, you could just leave me an emoji or say, hey, creep. That's totally fine, and it helps to support the channel. You can also find me on Patreon, Instagram, Goodreads. I'm now on TikTok, and you can also find my books linked down below. I have a link with all the books I've written, short stories that have been published that were written by me. I would really appreciate it if you would check out my work, and I will catch you very, very soon in another episode of Library Macabre. Later, creeps.